Take one of the most dangerous LA bands of the 88-93 period, the best band of the time, and try to imagine what it would be like to live in such an environment. As bassist for Guns N' Roses, Duff McKagan lived a unique life constellated with highs and lows. But being part of one of the best bands of that era is just a piece of who Duff is. Duff is, first and foremost, a great human being that was able to do something great as a musician, and above all to achieve great results as a man, a husband, a father, a businessman. It's So Easy and Other Lies is a great book to discover the great source of inspiration that Duff is. Hi all, this is Luca speaking, and in this video I'm sharing another book that inspired me from a musician and a person that inspires me a lot. I want to tell you why, so that you can find it inspiring too and check it out if you haven't done it yet. As usual, if you find the video interesting, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and tell me what you think in the comments, and switch on the notification bell. One of my first out-of-town concerts was in late spring 1993, Guns N' Roses playing in Modena, Italy. 50,000 people, 250,000 watts for 16, 17 years old kids. That was some serious stuff. Guns had already played San Siro Stadium in Milan the year before, with Soundgarden and Fate No More opening, and I had missed it, but this time they were less than 40 kilometers from home, so 25 miles. I and some friends from high school were huge Guns fans, so we took the train to reach Modena from Bologna, where we lived. We walked to the stadium and spent the whole afternoon waiting for the band to appear. And trust me, we waited a lot, but it was worth it. As supporting acts, we had Brian May, one of my idols that I could see in front of me from the 7th, 8th row, and Suicidal Tendencies. And being a bassist myself, I was really impressed by their bass player. I already knew him from the Infectious Grooves album that I owned, and his name is Robert Trujillo, and his career has been great. I saw him live with Metallica just before COVID. At the time, I spent my afternoons playing bass along my records, and obviously Appetite for Destruction and the two User Illusions were among the ones that I played more. I loved to play along Guns N' Roses songs because the bass lines were so melodic and it was really big fun to play. We were in the pre-internet era, so everything I knew came from music, the videos, the newspapers, the specials on TV, and not much more. So Duff McKagan was a sort of idolized figure in my head. And one of the memories I have from those days are the interviews with the band, and I remember Duff puffy. I was a little naive at the time, and I was not so informed as I am now. The excesses the band was going through were about to take their toll, and Duff's image was a clear picture of it. Guns were about to implode, and just 1 month after that concert, the 28 months tour to support the User Illusions double album ended, as well as Guns N' Roses as we knew them. Fast forward to 2005-2006, a friend of mine handed me a CD and told me, "You must listen to this, it's basically Guns N' Roses minus Axl." The CD was Velvet Revolver's debut album, Contraband, and I thought it was great. Leave alone Duff / Matt. I loved Stone Temple Pilots, and I found Scott Weiland to be a terrific performer. I then went online to see the band performing live, and looking at the bass player I thought, is that really Duff? I was surprised. He looked a completely different person, he looked healthy, he looked so much younger than 15 years before. Some years back I purchased and read his biography, that's here, It's So Easy and Other Lies. And let me tell you, this book really deserves to be read. The story is great. He is really good at telling it, but what's more, I find it so inspiring. Duff McKagan is the living proof that you never say never, that you can do anything, and that it's never too late to put your life back on track, to change your life to the better, and to have a great impact on those you love. I purchased the English version of It's So Easy and Other Lies in paperback edition. This book is from 2012. And as I said before, the book is great. Duff has a very engaging style of writing. I've read so many autobiographies from musicians, singers and athletes, and this one, in my opinion, is one of the best. The book starts with a prologue of his current life as of 2012, being a father and finding himself dealing with his 12 years old daughter and her friends for her birthday party. And in a funny way, he is able to introduce some tough topics around his life at the same age. At 12, he had already drunk, used pot, acids, and that was the beginning of a life of excesses that culminated in 1994 with a near-death experience caused by the abuse of alcohol and cocaine. Duff states it clear in the first chapter of the book. Waking up to an excruciating pain on May 10th, 1994, he couldn't move, blocked in his bed by the tremendous pain. And his pancreas had reached the size of a football and basically it had burst. Its digestive enzymes had been released and burned all the tissue around. He had third-degree burns all over the inside of his body. He then details what life was after this event, after he decided to steer away from the path he was on. The book is written in a very small font, but it's a pleasure to read. It is arranged in parts and sections whose chapters follow Duff's life. I would summarize this as pre-near death and new life. The first goes till part 4, while the second goes on to the end of the book. In the first part, Duff alternates chapters on his childhood and teen years and chapters about his first arrival in Los Angeles. It's also interesting that in the prologue and in the first chapter, he anticipates some topics, sentences and events that will then be narrated later with more details. And I think that this is why during the course of the entire book, the reader reads events that sound familiar, and while going through the details, he has a clearer vision of the broader picture. So Duff is really good at this. And from part 2 onwards, he describes the building of Guns N' Roses and the recording of Appetite for Destruction to the moment that the album exploded and catapulted the band into stardom. It talks about the craziness of the Use Your Illusion tour to the moment he found himself unable to move and about to die. From part 5 to the end, we then read about his life after that pivoting moment, how he faced to the return to a normal life, how he got healthier, and that, if you want, is the most inspiring aspect. Music is of course an important part of this, including the genesis of Velvet Revolver and all the side projects, but this book is not a chronicle of music recording, concerts, events. The book is rooted around Duff as a person, with his ambitions, issues, happy moments, struggles. Music is central, is a constant, but there's so much more. As a former Guns N' Roses fan, it's great to hear the stories about the early days, the touring and all the anecdotes, but I think it's more interesting to read about a person's emotions, feelings and experiences, having to deal with all he went through. This is where inspiration resides, in my opinion. As usual, I don't want to spoil the whole book, but share some highlights. There are many in this book, but let's say the first thing to emerge is that Duff is and has always been one of those guys who want to play music and are serious about it. He never looked at music, at this art, as a way to become rich, to become successful. He states this very clearly. After gaining some success and exposure in the Seattle area, he wanted to go to a higher level, and he recognized that Los Angeles was the place to be. So there he went, without any solid plan. And after arriving to Los Angeles, he met Slash and Steven and joined their band. He found they were good, but he decided to leave their band. So Slash was already a great guitar player. He decided to leave because they were not going in the same direction he thought was good for him. He explained it to them, they remained friends, so Duff managed to have Axl check him out when he needed to replace spots in the Guns N' Roses. Spots left vacant by Tracy Guns and Rob Gardner as guitarist and drummer respectively. When Duff entered Guns N' Roses, he found that both Axl and Izzy shared his same vision. And he suggested that to become a tough unit, the band needed an experience, a strong experience together. It needed a test, so he proposed a tour in the Northwest, in the Seattle area, where he came from. It was hundreds of miles from LA. So leveraging his connections in the Seattle area, he was able to book days for this tour with zero budget or zero support. And this was not for Tracy and Rob, who left. So Slash and Steven came in and they were okay with this. And after a few days of rehearsals, they were on. In the book, you can read about how the car broke, how they had to hitchhike, starving with no money. But this proved to be an experience that was worth to cement the group as a tight, strong unit. It was a band now, and also Slash in his biography confirms how this trip helped. It's really interesting to walk with Duff through the weeks that passed from that trip to when Appetite was recorded. How the group was not only a band but a sort of family for each member. It's also an honest picture of what LA life was at the time for aspiring musicians, as you can read also in other books like The Dirt by Motley Crue and Relentless by Yngwie J. Malmsteen. When Appetite was released, the band more or less continued the old life. Though they enjoyed popularity in the UK, they were below the radar in America, boycotted by MTV, until Sweet Child of Mine was released as a single. The video started going in high rotation on MTV and carried the record after 1 year to the number one. And we get this message from the book. That was a high point, right? But things didn't go upwards from that point on. They rather started declining pretty soon. The attention that they were getting, the increasing personality clashes, the increase of substances intake, they all played a role in having the individuals estranged one another. 1 month before his health incident, Duff took a plane from LA to Seattle, and he met Kurt Cobain that was waiting to take the same flight. They started speaking and they ended up flying, one seated next to the other. They were both hitting, or they had already hit, rock bottom. In a few days, Kurt killed himself. I see a sort of crossroad moment here. They were both young, they were both famous, they were both living what others would consider a dream, and yet they both had a great hole inside. The way people react is different though. Kurt probably decided he couldn't take it anymore. On the emergency room table, with excruciating pain that morphine couldn't calm down, when hearing that they probably had to cut a part of his pancreas and that he would have to live the rest of his life in dialysis, Duff asked the doctors to kill him. But when he saw his mother in a wheelchair because of her Parkinson's, looking at him with all life support systems engaged, something clicked inside him. He understood the impact his actions had on both himself and others. A few months earlier, the family had tried to force him into rehab, but there was no way he would do it. It wasn't clear to him, but now he understood. And from that point on, he resolved to get better, to live his life as he owed to himself and to them. The surgery in the end didn't have to take place, and he eventually returned home. It's interesting to notice that Duff was able to steer his life, but trying to do things in a good way without really knowing what he had to do, because he didn't know how to live life like a normal person, like going to the grocery store and buy food. He understood that pain, or how he calls it, good pain, was key. Good pain was fatigue, like taking hours and hours of bike rides cycling through the hills. And after some months, his brain was clearer and his spirits improved. He left Seattle, got back to LA, and restarted his life with his bicycle, and he then started going to the gym every day. He entered the dojo of Benny the Jet Urquidez. So he was determined to live a good life. The great thing about this book is also the two important lessons that we receive: helping others and never think you've made it. When Scott Weiland entered Velvet Revolver, he was using. He came from a long string of drug-related issues that included legal issues. And when Scott confessed that he wanted to get better, but the standard programs didn't work, Duff took him under his wings, if you want. Duff, helped by a sensei, went away in a house in the mountains, miles and miles far from any open road. They set a sort of camp and trained Scott on healthy food, martial arts, meditation. It served the purpose, and when they got back, Velvet Revolver took off. Unfortunately, Scott had a number of issues and relapsed months later, to then die in 2015. And that was the first lesson. And let's talk about the second lesson. You've been able to steer your life. You turn yourself from a person falling to pieces to a rock, a martial artist, a member of yet another supergroup traveling the world, and a successfully married man. So some sense of accomplishment is natural, right? But here comes the never think you've made it part, because in the book he tells how becoming a little soft for just a limited time, he became addicted to medications again. But he also explains how he got out of it again with even more self-awareness. And I think the lessons is also we live to learn. We're not expected to never do mistakes. We're not expected to always be perfect, but we are expected instead to learn from our lives and every day be a little better than the day before. One last highlight for me: after he got sober and before forming Velvet Revolver, Duff made some attempts to better understand the Guns N' Roses financials. He was still receiving royalties, but he went through the financial records and he couldn't make heads or tails. He then completed a basic finance course and then enrolled at Seattle University, Albert School of Business and Economics. In the book, he tells about what it is like to finish a concert and then go backstage to study for an exam the following day, or call one of the professors to have some clarifications. He then founded a wealth management firm for musicians, whose purpose is also to educate them about their finances. This is not the only example, of course. Another one comes to my mind about one of the legends that I admire so much, the great bluesman Howlin' Wolf, who returned to school in his 40s. He earned a diploma and then took accounting and business courses to better manage his career. All respect to this great man. As you might have noticed, I really enjoyed reading this book and I cannot but encourage you to read it. It doesn't matter if you are a Guns N' Roses fan or if you don't even know who Duff is. I'm convinced that The potential audience to this book is very, very broad. You can look at this book as a great source of inspiration. And these days I'm reading also his second book, How to Be a Man and Other Illusions. I'm almost at the end of it. And he is a very well written book as well, but we will talk about it at a later stage. In the meanwhile, go look for this one. If you found this video interesting, remember to give a like to it and consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. This is Luca on Music Fingerprints, thanking you and hoping to see you again for the next videos.